Igor Tudor has now officially been announced by the club as the interim boss.
I'm here not to enjoy, I'm here to work.
And still Ricky Villa! What a fantastic run! He scored!
Gascoigne going to have a crack. He is, you know. Oh, it's there!
Here's Lucas Moura! Oh, they've done it! The wait for silverware is over!
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Tottenham Way podcast. I'm Marcus Buckland. After something of a sleepless night, I have to say, off the back of our 3-1 home defeat to Crystal Palace. It was horrendous, and I've been lying in bed just wondering what on earth has happened to this once great football club. Who's to blame? What is going to happen next? Feeling a degree of guilt, actually. I've had all these messages this morning saying, oh, well, it's your fault. You wanted Ange out. I mean, is that where it all started? Is that the obvious answer? I'm not so sure about that, but we're in a fight. We're in a massive fight. We're now just 1 point above the relegation zone. We could be in the bottom three by the time we play our next league game at Liverpool at the end of next week. Because prior to that, West Ham, informed West Ham, are at home to Manchester City. Wouldn't be a huge surprise if they got something out of that game. And Nottingham Forest take on Fulham as well. So we're in it. We all know that. George Sessions of the Press Association is alongside me. He wears the club's crest very close to his heart. So, George, I know how much you're hurting this morning as well. First of all, just sum up another woeful 90 minutes in the Premier League life of Tottenham Hotspur.
Yeah, it's a disastrous 24 hours, I think. I certainly hoped that this would kind of be the night where, we turned up and we turned it around and it was the start of the comeback. And instead, we finished the night 1 point above the relegation zone. And as bad as things were last season, we was obviously never close to that. So, I mean, when was we last 1 point above the relegation zone? In March, probably when Klinsmann saved us that season? Was it 96, 97? 97, 98? So we're talking sort of 30 years since we've been in this situation. And yeah, I think everything kind of went the wrong way, didn't it? West Ham getting the win at Fulham, Forest getting a point at Man City, Spurs starting how they did on Thursday night. I thought they started really poorly. We then get a little bit of luck because Ismail Assar's nose is too big, so he gets given offside. Ridiculous. Even as a Tottenham fan, I just can't believe that got disallowed. It's stupid. But anyway, we get that momentum. Then Archie Gray, as he so often does this season, just produces a moment, a little bit of brilliance, sets up Solanke, and I'm sort of thinking, yes, we're finally back ahead. First time we've been ahead in the game in the Premier League since Burnley. Please now kick on from this. This is the night we turn it around and we shoot ourselves in the foot, or I should have said Micky van der Ven has made an awful decision. And even after that, obviously you can see the penalty, it's 1-1. But we just collapsed like a pack of cards, didn't we, in the sort of final 10 minutes or 15 minutes of the first half left after that Ismail Assar penalty. And in fairness, I kind of thought it might become 5 or 6 in that second half, the way it ended the first half. And some of the players showed some fight in that second half and a bit of grit and determination. But my word, it's a disastrous situation. And the only thing I can kind of cling on to is that nobody now associated with the club, associated with Tottenham, can ignore the threat of relegation. It is now staring us all in the face. And if anyone at that football club still wants to not talk about relegation, well, get your head out of the sand, guys, because it's real, it's there. You got to face up to it.
Yeah, and you've got to wonder whether Igor Tudor is the man to try and navigate our passage to safety. I know he's only been there for 3 matches, but he's lost all 3. He's meant to be a firefighter. He seems to be more of an arsonist. I'm not sure that his communication skills are great. We will talk about that. By the way, thank you so much, everybody, for either watching us or listening to us. It's not much fun. I've got to say, the past few days I just have not wanted to talk about football. So thank you for listening. Do like and subscribe. It helps us. We say that every week, but we're looking to grow our base, hopefully for another Premier League campaign next season. So we do appreciate your company, your support, and all your comments. Let's just talk about the team selection first of all, before we go into more detail about Igor himself. For the first game in charge, he went with the back 3 against Arsenal. He then went to a flat back 4 at Fulham at the weekend. He went to a 3 again last night. And to me, I can say, yeah, with hindsight, it's easy. But George, when I saw that 11, trying to work out who's going to play where, in my mind, he's making life even more complicated than it needs to be. Could you make any sense before kickoff of what he was trying to do with that starting team?
No, definitely not, because I thought it was a 4-3-3, and I was quite happy. I was sort of thinking you've got Porro at right back, you've got Tell as a left wing, you've got Colomwani as a right wing. I probably would have played Xavi as a 10, even though he's not been good, just because, you need some sort of creative player. But, midfield three of Sarr, Paulinho and Gray is not too bad. And then you see the lineup and you've got Porro as a right centre back, not his position. You've got Archie Gray as a right wing back, not his position. And that's happened every game, hasn't it? You just let's go back to Arsenal. Paulinho's out of position. You've got Gray at right wing back again. Xavi was left midfield against Fulham. Gallagher was right midfield against Fulham as well. It's kind of, he is making things far more complicated than it needs to be. He's got to simplify matters, and that's kind of why we're probably at a point where we're sort of thinking, how long has he got left? Because it doesn't feel that hard. Me and Tom Allnut were talking last night saying, just play 4-2-3-1. Just put Xavi as a 10, play Porro at right wing, right back, sorry. Play Tell as a left midfielder, put Colomani as a right midfielder. It's really not that complicated. And yet it feels like it, and I just don't think that is helping. There is so many problems at Tottenham. Igor Tudor is not the person solely to blame. Same way Thomas Frank wasn't. There's lots of issues. But Igor Tudor's came in and he's had 3 games and he's had 3 defeats and things have not got better. And his job was to come in and give us a bounce. And the fact that he hasn't got that is why people are now talking today about his job being up for threat, which sounds utterly ridiculous after 3 games. But in this situation, it's not actually ridiculous. It actually feels like one of the only things Tottenham can do to sort of turn this around and to get the bounce that they desperately need. Because 2 wins might be enough. It's probably 3, but you could put me and you, Marcus, on the touchline, and we might put an arm around some players, and maybe we would get the win that would spark it into life. But we all hoped Igor Tudor would do that, and he hasn't so far. And
no, he hasn't.
The fact he hasn't done it is why his job is going to be discussed over the next week.
Well, yeah, because he was the guy that comes in and makes an immediate impact. And I think we all accepted first game Arsenal might not be the case, but then you go and lose as abjectly as they did to a Fulham side, who, of course, then loses at home to West Ham. And then Crystal Palace missing their best defender. They've been struggling. And we tend to make all these very average opponents look like world beaters. Of course, he pointed to the penalty and, the red card, the whole penalty business as being a turning point, which it was to a degree. But even then, he shuffles the pack. It's difficult in that situation. We've got to talk about Van de Ven, George. And when the dust settles at the end of this season, and let me first of all say that you were absolutely right to pinpoint the fact that Van de Ven was not ignoring Igor Tudor during the Arsenal game. We know that was a situation that was rather badly interpreted by some. But I'm pretty sure that whether we go down or not at the end of this season, George, when I look back at the whole campaign, I'm going to look in particular at the performances of Cristian Romero and Van de Ven, 2 of our best players, arguably the 2 best players in the squad. And both have been guilty, really, of a dereliction of duty. The fact that Romero is currently sitting out 4 games and has had 2 red cards of late, can be very good when he wants to be, but is also incredibly ill-disciplined at times. And now there's Van de Ven captaining the side. Okay, in the heart of the battle, you might make a wrong decision, but goodness me, what a costly error that was. And I've got the impression from him and from Romero and from several others that we've got players in this team who think they're much better than they are, think they're far too good for Tottenham, and basically just want this season to end. I'm not saying they don't care, but what I am saying is I think their priority is basically, where am I going to get a good move to in the summer? This is all beneath me. And that has played a huge role, I feel, in the current mess that we're in.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from, Marcus. And look, it's a split-second decision that Micky van der Ven makes, but he has got to have some sort of presence in mind in that moment, just to realise, let Sarr go through, let him score. A goal in that situation is not a disaster. Having 10 men for 50 minutes is a disaster. And look, in that moment, Micky van der Ven has let his teammates down. He's let the club down in the same way that Cristian Romero let the club and his teammates down when he got sent off at Man United. And look, for me, I like these two guys. I agree with you. I think they're two of Tottenham's best players. If not, they are their best players. And they are the heroes of Bilbao. And they may still remain the heroes of Bilbao. But they've got 9 games to save their legacy, basically. Because if Tottenham go down, then what people will talk about when it comes to Micky van der Ven will be this red card and will be the performances of this season. And what they'll talk about with Cristian Romero is his red cards and his performances. They won't talk about Bilbao, because that moment and that euphoric moment, which was incredible, was followed by something even more greater than that, but from the opposite scale, from a worse perspective. So it's, I do like those two guys, and I'm frustrated at how they've performed this season. And I don't have sympathy for them, but I don't think they've been helped by certain situations. But none of that matters now. They've got 9 games genuinely to save their legacy. If they keep Tottenham up and they both leave in the summer, we will remember this season, but the abiding image will be Bilbao. If we go down, they will be remembered for going down. People won't talk about Micky's clearance in Bilbao or Romero shutting down Maguire and single-handedly winning that game for Tottenham. They'll talk about them two defenders taking us to the Championship. So it's now or never for those two. Micky's going to miss 1 game, so he's going to miss Liverpool, and then he'll be back for Forest. Romero is back for Liverpool, and obviously we've got the Champions League games before that. So the first chance for both of them to atone is Atletico away next Tuesday. But with the greatest of respect to the Champions League and to that game, I honestly don't really care about that anymore. It's all about these Premier League games, and those two guys have got to save us now, because if they don't, their legacy is ruined, unfortunately.
100%. Funnily enough, we were talking about this before we started the podcast, but both of us wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Spurs go and get a half-decent result in Madrid next week. I mean, that'd be so typically Tottenham, but yet it doesn't really matter. And, you look at some of the stats. These two are the key at the back. Spurs have won only 12 of their last 53 league games. 12 wins in 53. And we've now conceded 2 or more goals in 9 successive league games. And that is the first time in the club's history that has happened. We're on this appalling run, the worst run since, 1935? Something like that. And George, that's what worries me, that there is just no sign of this team turning a corner, while West Ham and Nottingham Forest suddenly find a little bit of inspiration. And that takes me back to Igor Tudor, and I just don't see him being the guy to sort things out. And yeah, it sounds ridiculous to sack somebody after 3 games, and we all laugh when Nottingham Forest got rid of Postecoglou so early on. But in the current scenario, with only 9 to go, you can't hang around. But if they do decide to pull the cord on him, where do they turn to next? Now, I did suggest Harry Redknapp a few weeks ago, and most people laughed at me. And I know he's not far off 80. But I didn't think then that it was a ridiculous notion. I certainly don't now. They need somebody to put an arm around some of these players, just to remind them of the basics, to show them some love, to give them some belief. And I still believe that would be the way to go. Harry, maybe with a couple of, coaches, a couple of guys who will go out and do the nitty gritty in terms of the tactics and all the rest of it during the training sessions. I mean, can you see that as being the only way forward at this critical stage now?
Yeah, Harry Redknapp doesn't seem so crazy now, does it? It's all just to do with this situation, really. There's Igor Tudor never would have got the Tottenham job if Tottenham weren't in this situation probably, and maybe Paratici wasn't, at the club so recently. And Harry Redknapp wouldn't be spoken about if it wasn't such a dire situation. But these are all now kind of actual, seemingly logical solutions. Before we sort of talk about Harry, and I think it's probably the role of the dice that Spurs may have to take. But I personally think Spurs are going down if Igor Tudor stays in charge. I just don't think he's got the bounce that we needed. I don't think I don't think his messaging to the players, he talked to players after Fulham, and that could have gone one or two ways. And then when you look at the first 10 minutes last night, I think Spurs had 17% possession at home to a Palace team, which, by the way, don't actually like to have the ball that often. They like to hit on the transition. They're normally having around 45% possession every game, and they were dominating Spurs. So whatever Tudor's doing on the training ground, it's not working. I don't think the players are really buying into it. Even post-matches, he's talking about, he said that he had more belief after this game, which I think is, sort of as deluded as Thomas Frank saying he expected to be there after the Newcastle game. But he was talking about, people needing to get on the boat, and anyone that doesn't want to get on the boat needs to jump off. Mate, you've got like 15 players. You can't really be talking in those terms about getting rid of players. You need everyone in that squad right now. So I think Tottenham are going down if Igor Tudor stays for the next 9 games. The only thing I'm going to throw back to you, Marcus, is do you make the change now before 2 games with Atletico and an away game at Liverpool, or do you let Tudor have these Atletico games, let Spurs go out, and then you bring in someone for the Nottingham Forest game? I'm not really sure. Is it better to bring in a new man now, and then these Atletico games are kind of a free hit to get his ideas across, or does that kill the confidence straight away and you just let Tudor have him? I don't really know, but I'm sort of maybe leaning towards giving Tudor those games, but I don't think either solution is great.
I think, George, if the club deep down don't think he's the right man, and it's clear that the players don't think he's the right man, just do it now. What's the point of wasting another week or so? I mean, it was interesting, as you say, he was talking after the game last night about being more confident now than he had been before. Well, I'm sorry, I think he's just saying that to try and ensure that he keeps his job for a bit longer. But there's no sign of that being the case whatsoever. I'd bring in the new team, let them get settled. We got this, I don't want to say it's a complete free hit against Atletico Madrid, because obviously if we got a decent result and somehow we can keep the campaign going and then haul ourselves out of trouble, it could yet be a really exciting end to the season. But I'd do it now. I really would. And I don't think the club will necessarily. I mean, let's go back to what we said weeks ago, months ago. Nobody knows what they're doing there, George. This is the problem. And equally, those who go around saying, as I've now read, we're missing Daniel Levy and all the rest of it, I'm not buying into that. You made your thoughts about Levy clear a few weeks ago. It's his micromanagement over the past 20-odd years that has got us into this situation. He appointed Thomas Frank. People go, he'd have sacked him earlier. Okay, he might have done. And maybe he might have bought another player or two in the transfer window. I don't know. We don't know that at all. He brought in Johan Lange. Let's get this absolutely clear. Daniel Levy's fingerprints are all over this. So let's stop suddenly going, we missed the man. No. It's been leading to this. Of course, it's spiraled out of control since the changes in the summer. And again, lack of communication, lack of anything from up top is dispiriting, but not surprising. This club has been run so badly, unfortunately, for such a long time. And the pigeons are coming home to roost right now. So I've got no faith in them doing the right thing at the moment. But to answer your question, I think if you're going to make the change, you've got to do it straight away. I mean, there seems to be a lot of friction behind the scenes, a lot of toxicity. The fans are all having a go at each other again last night. It's so sad, George. I mean, it's barely 10 months since we won a European trophy. For it to get out of control to this degree is horrendous. But I think you've got to act now. Got to get on with it. And yeah, I do think that Harry let's say they do make the change. What's the lineup going to be? I mean, we hear talk of Jermaine Defoe being part of a coaching setup. Tim Sherwood's name is mentioned again. I mean, I'm putting you in charge, George. What are you going to do right now?
I think I would phone Harry. I think I would. I probably wouldn't have said that a month ago, but I know, and I'm kind of talking myself into this because you have to be positive, and there is not a lot to be positive about. But the example, because obviously the big stick to beat Harry with is he's been out of the game for a long time. Look, his last job was 2017 with Birmingham. However, he took over Birmingham struggling against relegation in the Championship. He had 3 games left. He lost his first game to Aston Villa, won the final 2, and Birmingham stayed up. So he's got some not recent, but he's got some experience, I guess, of this kind of situation. But I guess the other thing I kind of look at is Martin O'Neill at Celtic. Martin O'Neill had been out of the game for 6 years, and Celtic were a mess. They really were. Been a mess twice this season. Firstly under Brendan Rodgers, and then secondly under Wilfred Nancy. And O'Neill gets the job, and he's not gone in there and revolutionised tactically the team and put on these amazing sessions. He's gone in there with some young coaches, and he's sort of gone back to basics because he knows football. Of course he does. He's been a manager for decades and decades, a huge success. And if you go into a group that are low on confidence and you tell them that they're world beaters and you give them simple instructions, you should see some sort of response. And I think we are at that situation where Harry Redknapp going in with maybe Jermaine Defoe as a coach, using some of the younger guys there. Stuart Lewis, I've spoken about before, is a very good coach. And Stuart Lewis actually worked with Jermaine Defoe in the under-18, so they've already got a link. Let Harry go in, try and sort of, whatever we think of these players, they're the only ones that are going to get us out of this. So they need to be filled with confidence. And unfortunately, Igor Tudor hasn't done that. With his we lack in attack, we lack in midfield, we lack in defence. And just kind of with Harry, I've just been sort of, the first thing I thought of is that, God, he must have torched this squad at some point over the last 12 months. But in actual fact, the kind of little bits and bobs I've seen him talking about Tottenham, he actually speaks like a man that actually gets the situation. I sort of listened to an interview he did with Sky Sports the day after Thomas Frank got sacked. And I'll read out his quotes here. And the reason I'm reading this out is because, to be honest, this sounds like what the Tottenham manager should be saying right now. And it makes me think maybe Harry's the one that can get the 3 wins we need. Because he said on February 11th, could I do the job? Yes, of course I could do the job. What they need now is someone to go in, get down to basics and hard work. When you lose the ball, don't be embarrassed to run and get it back. Close down, work together, bit of confidence, make them believe in themselves. And if somebody goes in and does that, they can get the results they need. But it ain't going to be easy because they've been in free-for-all and they're getting sucked into that relegation. They have to make sure whoever they bring in, whoever it is, that they've got to be the right person to keep them up. Because first and foremost, that's the most important thing, staying in the Premier League. And what I like about that quote is that's a month ago that Harry Redknapp has acknowledged that Tottenham are in a relegation battle, because no one else has acknowledged that Tottenham are in a relegation battle. Thomas Frank wouldn't use the word. Igor Tudor's been reluctant to use the word. I think the whole squad have been reluctant to use the word. Even people at the club, you mention relegation at the club and they say, let's not talk about that. We don't need to talk that into existence. We're going to be fine. Guys, we've won 2 in 20. Wake up, people. Like, this has been clear for months. Honestly, the way Tottenham played at Palace in December, it felt like a relegation team. The team was sleepwalking towards relegation. Now they're hurtling towards it. And the only sort of crumb of comfort I can take from the last 24 hours is that people now realise we're in the shit. And once you realise that, then you can take your first steps towards it. But going back to Harry, I kind of think he would get the team set up in a pretty basic way, 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3, which suits the players that we have available. And if he's got some young coaches around him, like Martin O'Neill has, Martin O'Neill's got Sean Maloney, he's got Stephen McManus is as well. 2 guys that were, Sean Maloney's been a manager, but they were both part of the setup anyway. But young coaches with good ideas, they will do the sessions. And what Spurs need to work on is their attacking play, because the attack has been awful for yonks. And Spurs are conceding 2 goals every game, as you mentioned, Marcus, 9 in a row now in the Premier League. So the only way they're going to get out of this is by scoring goals. And unfortunately, they seem to have not worked on attacking patterns of plays for yonks. And the only way we can score is from set pieces. So get Harry in, get the coaches, the young coaches like Stuart Lewis, Jermaine Defoe, working on the attacking phases of play, and then hope that quality players, as they are, Solanke, Xavi Simons, Kudos will be back after the March international break. Tell is showing some fire. Richarlison's definitely up for the fire. Hope that those guys can score the goals to get you out of it. And I think that, let's be honest, we've got more chance of staying up with Harry Redknapp than Igor Tudor, I think, right now. No. I don't think many would disagree with that.
No, I totally concur. I also accept people who will laugh at us. Oh, you're going to bring back 79-year-old Harry Redknapp, whatever. Age is but a number. He's got the experience. I think you're absolutely right. If he has the right young guys alongside him, and that the players just feel a little bit of love and belief and understanding once again. We have got the quality, and that's what we've got to remember. George, I know that the results over the past year and a half have been terrible, and it's a very disjointed team. But you mentioned some of those players there, and that's what does give me a little bit of belief. I still just cannot understand how a team with that much ability, if not great quality, that much ability has failed to win a league game in 2026. But, looking at last night, and it's been the case for a while, I think the only player who can be absolved of any criticism is Archie Gray, who's fought like a tiger, has the assist for Solanke. He's got the belief. And I don't buy into the fact that there are others who really don't care. I know I mentioned that Van der Ven and Romero long-term are looking at their future. Of course they are. But they don't want to be part of a team that's been relegated. Of course they don't. They're professionals. They've got a degree of pride, you'd hope. They also know that their legacy will be severely tarnished if Spurs go down. And then I look at some of the other players who've had some relegation experience. And actually it was interesting talking to you because Richarlison's been there before. He basically kept Everton up one year, didn't he, with his goals? And I was really surprised that he didn't start the game last night. We all know that deep down he's not really the long-term answer. But in this current malaise, when you've got Richarlison back and fit and he's just scored a goal at Fulham, you've got to start him 3 days later. That is not rocket science. I'd forgotten that Dominic Solanke has actually experienced relegation before with Bournemouth. You were telling me that Sousa's been in a similar situation with Santos, and I'll be interested in a moment to get your thoughts on whether he's good enough to play a part between now and the end of the season. But there are enough players with the experience. And I also hope that someone like a Xavi, who's been a huge letdown so far this season, but has shown glimpses. George, you've got to go to him right now, haven't you? When you've spent that much money, he is potentially a match winner. So to leave him out last night, I just find the team selection woeful. And as we've said, he's making life unnecessarily complicated as Igor Tudor. But there are players there. I mean, tell me I'm not deluded. We've got a good enough squad to stay out of relegation trouble if we've got the right person pulling the strings, haven't we?
It's all about confidence. These players have genuinely forgotten how to win. And when you're in that situation, you can't see a way out of it. There's good players in this squad. I think I said a few times, when everyone's fit, maybe the squad is sixth or seventh. I'm probably wrong with that now. I'm happy to admit that. But it is not a bloody 16th, 17th, 18th place squad. It's really not. Even with the injuries, there is enough quality there. We need to get back to keeping the ball, first of all, because all of these 3 games under Igor Tudor, Spurs just sit back and try and soak up pressure. That is not how we're going to get out of that. We can't defend to save our lives. So attack has got to be the best form of defence. And the only way you do that is by keeping the ball. And there's certain players in this team, as you said, Marcus, are not going to be the answer long term. Probably Richarlison, probably someone like Yves Bissouma. But actually, last night they showed a bit of fight. Yves Bissouma came on, was keeping the ball, was trying to make things happen. Richarlison should have come on so much earlier last night. Same for Xavi. They came on and we had a little flurry towards the end, but it was too late. And 3-1 down, you've got nothing to lose. But there is players in this squad that can get us out of that, and that's what we have to kind of lean onto. And look, it's hard to be positive right now, but there is 9 games to go. There's 2 months to go. We are going to get some players back. There is time to turn this around. There absolutely is. Mohamed Kudus will make a difference. I think Lucas Bergvall, with his energy and his drive and his kind of spirit that was never broken last season, will make a difference. And I think those guys will be up for the fight. Can't think of too many others of the players coming back that are going to really make a big impact. If Jed Spence will be back for the Atletico game, I think, and Destiny Dog is obviously a fine footballer on his day, but can't stay fit. But Kudos and Bergvall, in terms of going forward and going the other way, they will help Spurs. And look, the fixtures are there. If you wanted to stay up, you would pick Forest at home, you would pick Everton at home, you'd pick Leeds at home, you'd pick Brighton at home. They are the games you pick to win to stay up. Spurs have just got to win one, and once they win one, the clouds will lift, and that kind of feeling of how you win a game in the Premier League will come back. But they've won 2 games since November, so that is why the confidence is so low and the morale is just not there. And once something goes against this Spurs team, they collapse. And you've got to hope that they're going to get a win over the next month or so, and then we can get out of this. But they've got to find that one win. I thought it was going to come against Palace, and it didn't. So Forest is the next one we look at, and got to get something from that.
Yeah, I've got to say, I was absolutely convinced that we were going to beat Crystal Palace last night, and that's why I think the shock is even more dramatic and disastrous from that point of view. I mean, Spurs being Spurs, we mentioned we might go and get something at Madrid. Maybe we'll go to Liverpool and win. Stranger things have happened, but not many. And actually, it's a good point you make. There are still 9 games to go. I mean, that's almost a quarter of a season. So we've got to try and stay relatively calm, which is really difficult when you watch a match like last night and the way in which things unravelled. I'm going to ask you about the fans in a moment and also about the goalkeeper. I did touch upon Sousa, who's come in. I mean, we look at who we bought in January. It was Sousa and it was Gallagher. Now, in Gallagher's defence, George, he's been played here, there and everywhere. But I think it's fair to say he has been a massive disappointment so far. He really has. He hasn't come close to being in a winning team yet. Sousa's a youngster. I mean, have both those players got enough in them to play a part here? Because they're the players that the club turn to in an hour of not crisis, an hour of impending crisis in January.
Well, I mean, let's stick the boot in again. Look at what all the other clubs did in January. Look at what West Ham did. They went and signed Castellanos, isn't it, and a few other players to get themselves out of this situation, and it's made an impact. Palace signed Brennan Johnson, didn't they? And more sort of significantly for them because he's got a few goals. George and Strang Larson. Forest signed somebody from Napoli. The name escapes me. They all went out and got players to get them out of this situation. And we sold somebody that scores goals and who wasn't having a good season, admittedly, in Brennan Johnson, and brought in Conor Gallagher. That's plays in a different position to Brennan Johnson, but has played right midfield more often than not, hasn't he, since he joined Spurs? So he's not had a good start to his Spurs career, but neither did Gareth Bale, and he got going in the end. Harry Redknapp got him going. And we've got Sousa, who I actually didn't think was too bad last night, to be honest. He absolutely clattered into Daniel Muniz after 7 minutes and got a yellow card. And I think the reason he came off is because Igor Tudor was probably fearful that he would get a second yellow and then we're down to 9 men. But I thought he was okay. He was up against Ismail Sarr, so obviously a very difficult opponent to deal with. But the goals that Sarr scored were more from him kind of coming inside, to be honest, rather than going behind Sousa off the top of my head. And look, I think Sousa can't play against Atletico. He's ineligible. He wasn't added to that Champions League squad, but probably will play Liverpool away. And look, he's a 19-year-old who is up for a scrap because he's just been part of a Santos team that got relegated and then got him back up. So he knows all about being under pressure from fans and not exactly having sort of pleasantries told to him. And I think he's showed a little bit of fight in all these games he's played. He wasn't bad at Man United. I thought he did a decent enough job at Fulham. And he was okay. He was okay last night. I think just for the balance of the team, you need to have a left footer at left back. We can't keep having a right footer at right back. It kills that whole left side, makes us so predictable. And I feel like a lot of us have been saying that genuinely for weeks, and then Igor Tudor comes in and does the exact opposite, which is what concerns me, because all these problems that we've said, playing Xavi as a left midfield, playing a right back at left back, we all know those things don't work, and Igor Tudor's come in and done that. Dom Solanke's good up front, and yet he's playing as a number 10 at times. So no, I think Sousa, I would give him a run until Udogie and Spencer back. Spencer obviously played this Atletico game. I'd probably not play him at Forest. I'd probably not play him at Liverpool, Jed Spence, that is. I'd save him for the following Atletico game and then play him against Forest if Destiny Udogie's not back. And look, Conor Gallagher came on last night and tried his best and showed good spirit, was trying to press well. And there is a player in there. It just sort of beggars belief that Tottenham needed to sign another number 8 that runs around when you've already got Sarr, Gray, Bergwall, Bentancur.
Yeah.
But hey ho, what do we know, Marcus?
Well, God knows, my head's so scrambled. I don't feel as though I know anything at the moment. I do want to ask you about the goalkeeper. There was an interesting comment actually from Ian Ladyman, who's a colleague of yours. He's been in the newspaper business for a very long time, and he said, "Oh, you could blame all sorts of different factors on where Spurs currently find themselves, but he is amazed that Vicario is still in goal. He says a good goalkeeper can make a real difference. A bad one can be a liability." Now, when Vicario arrived at the club, I was excited. I'll be honest, he's a great shot stopper. He had a bit of pizzazz, a bit of personality about him, or at least, that was the case then. To me now, he is shot to pieces. He's got no idea what to do when it comes to trying to distribute the ball. And I think he's making his defenders incredibly nervous all around him. There were rumours last night, George, I don't know if you heard them, that Kinski was going to come into the starting 11. And, obviously he's not the desired answer. But I really feel as though Vicario is a major issue at the moment. It would be a brave decision to drop your established goalkeeper as you go into a relegation battle. But what do you think Igor Tudor or whoever comes in his place should do in terms of the goalkeeping position?
Yeah, Vicario is just... Unfortunately, he just spreads anxiety and nervousness, not just into the team, but into the fan base. And I don't always think that's purely down to him. I think sometimes he's on the ball and maybe he's on it a little bit too long. But it's just those previous experiences and those previous incidents we've seen, like the Fulham home game, where fans can't take him being on the ball that long. Again, you go back to January. Spurs should have signed probably an experienced backup goalkeeper. I mean, actually, there was talk, wasn't there, about towards the end of the window about Kinski going to West Ham and Mads Hermansen coming to Tottenham. And funnily enough, West Ham's turnaround in form is coincided with Mads Hermansen going into their team and Areola coming out, and he's done a good job, Hermansen. So probably we should have done that deal after all, even though on paper it looked like a bit of a strange deal to do. But part of Vicario's issue is that Kinski is the one pushing him, and I've said it a number of times on this pod, and I hopefully I'm wrong if Kinski does come in and he has a world, unbelievable game. But I just don't think Kinski is at the level. He's regularly conceding shots from range. The Newcastle game this season that we saw came for crosses, didn't get nowhere near them. That is part of the problem for Vicario, is that there's no one behind him pushing him. And if we go back a few years, well, I guess Vicario's first season, Fraser Forster is pushing him at the very least. I think by year 2, Fraser Forster was also, gone. But that first year, he's pushing him. Go back to Lloris, and you had Michel Vorm pushing Lloris. Now, I've always remembered Michel Vorm having a shocker in the FA Cup semi-final versus Man United. But actually, on his day, he was a very, very decent keeper. We signed him from Swansea, who was starting every week. You need a good goalkeeper. Look at Newcastle, got Ramsdale and Nick Pope. You need a good second choice goalkeeper to keep the first choice on their toes. And unfortunately, Vicario's not had that for far too long. And his form has gone backwards. There's no doubt about it. And something I said a little while ago, he'll be sold in the summer because it's just a problem. And it's just a problem too often now. I really don't know if I would take him out of the firing line. I mean, maybe these Atletico games is a chance to play Kinski and put him in. And if he is shocking, and if he has some, lets in a few goals from range, okay, we can't do that in the Premier League. But if he does produce a good performance, and maybe it's a little bit like that Liverpool game where he came in, he was very good against Liverpool in his debut, wasn't he, Kinski? And I think we all thought, we've got a great keeper here. And it was the performances afterwards which tailed off. But maybe that's confidence. Maybe as a young goalkeeper, he needs to come in, and if he has a good performance, that can make a difference, and that will just spread a little bit of confidence to the rest of the team. But yeah, I mean, that's part of Tottenham's problem. They've got a goalkeeper that I think is not bad in Vicario, but has just lost all confidence, and no one has confidence in him in the team. And then you've also got a goalkeeper in Kinski that's just not kicked on since he signed, and I don't think he's good enough. So what do you do? It's not a great situation.
It's not. And I've got a little bit of sympathy for Vicario as well, because we say he's giving his defenders the heebie-jeebies. I mean, the fact is he's got a different set of defenders just in front of him every week as well. So that's not easy for a goalkeeper when the team is being changed around so much, not just the individuals, but the system too. Another interesting point, and I read this from a supporter, an Everton fan, who was giving some advice online to Spurs supporters. He said, listen, we've been in relegation trouble for so many years now. It's so important for the fans to get behind the team at this stage. He says, if you've been to Goodison Park over the past few years, last few games, it's a sea of blue. Okay, we've watched a load of shite all year, but we're going to have to get behind the team. We know that, and we are going to make, or we did make, Goodison Park a really difficult place to go to. And he said that, you Spurs fans, is now what you have got to do. Of course, we know that last night by half time, a load of people had gone home. A lot of people didn't even come in the first place. It was empty by the end. And you can understand why. We're all paying a lot of money, and we've watched a lot of shite and hardly seen any wins. So it's no surprise. And those people who suggest that Spurs fans are entitled and all the rest of it are, I'm afraid, speaking absolute nonsense. We've been through a lot. We're a loyal bunch. We spend a lot of money to go and watch Spurs week in, week out. We're not deluded. We've been one of the big six for many, many years. We've shown what we can do as a club under Pochettino. We finished second, we finished third, we've been in numerous semi-finals. We finally won a European final. We are a big club that's woefully underperformed, and I don't think the supporters can be blamed for feeling the misery of that, particularly this season. But now, have we got an even bigger role to play, George? Somehow we've got to forget the rubbish out on the pitch and get there and encourage every single supporter to make the ground like Bedlam when Nottingham Forest come and when Brighton come and when Leeds come. I think it's fair to say that it's going to be difficult, but these are key matches when the Spurs fans have got to somehow unite and get behind a poor team.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And look, and that's kind of partly why I think Tottenham's best way of getting the fans behind them is by attacking. I can't criticise the fans last night. There was some empty seats to begin with. The attendance was still announced as 60, and I think it probably was about 60,000 because there was only little pockets of empty seats, like high up in the east stand, a little bit in the north stand, and the noise was good to begin with. It really was. The fans were behind the team. But like I say, after 10 minutes, Spurs had 17% possession, I think it was. And actually the fans stayed behind the team. They really did. The noise when the Palace goal got disallowed was, enormously loud. And then Solanke scores and everyone's behind the team. And even, people were losing their head after the 2 goals in stoppage time, understandably. And yes, some fans left, at half time, but not that many, It wasn't like it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't look around that stadium for the start of the second half and think there is 30,000 fans here. There's 40,000. Maybe a few thousand left at half time, but not that many. It was a great image for the TV cameras to get people leaving at half time, but there really wasn't that many, in my opinion. And it was probably, Tudor made the subs late with Richarlison and Xavi coming on around 74 off the top of my head. I think there was a chance not long afterwards, and then around 80th minute, a lot of people left. But the noise was good at times. The fans were really trying to get behind the team, but they just weren't given anything. And I said it on the last pod that it was absolutely that point that Goodison would become a cauldron of noise for March, April, and May. Everton would lose to Brighton in September, and they'd lose to Forest in January. But come those final 3 months, that place was like Galatasaray. It was like Marseille, and that's what we've got to do for these 4 games. And if the team respond to that and do show attacking intent and get on the ball and try and keep the ball, then it goes hand in hand. There's so many times in all these games, and it normally is Archie Gray. Archie Gray gets the ball, runs forward, puts in across to win a corner or has a shot blocked, and then the crowd respond to him. It takes one person picking the ball up and running with it, and it gives the crowd something to get onto. And then they latch onto that, and they'll sing for the next 3, 4, 5 minutes, and they'll keep going. And then the team can build with that. But not enough of this team, and whether that's the manager's instructions or it's the players not having the confidence, not enough of them are taking the balls by the horn and doing it. And they've got to do it. And I honestly think the fans will get us over the line as long as the team is showing a semblance of fight and attacking mindset. And I think I said it at the start, Marcus. What I hope happens after this disastrous 24 hours is that it wakes everyone up, because the club and the players and the staff have not been woken up to this. They really haven't. They've all had their head in the sand. We're Tottenham. We'll be fine. I won't say it's arrogance, but it has felt like that at times. But no one can ignore it now. Spurs are really, really in it. And the only way they get out of it is by owning that. You're in a relegation battle, guys. Face up to it. And there was some quotes from Dominic Solanke after the game. And I understand fans not wanting to hear players talking right now because, it's all words. And he said, this is just words. It's got to be actions. But he said, we need to realise the situation we're in. We need to know that the situation we're in is nowhere near good enough. And we have to turn it around as soon as possible. We have to fight every game. And I don't think Spurs players have really spoke like that too often lately. It's been, we need to move up the table. We need to, we need to get back to winning games. He was speaking about the situation we are in, and that is a relegation battle. And we all know now, they didn't know it before, the club and the players and the coaches and the managers and the owners. They didn't know it before that they're in a relegation battle. They do now. So now do something about it, come together, and the fans will get behind you. And maybe they've got to roll the dice with the manager to get one last bounce. But the fact that everyone knows now we're in this situation is the first step to getting out of it.
Yeah, no, I 100% concur with you, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, because obviously we've got to go to Liverpool, and we may well be in the relegation zone at the end of that weekend. But then the big games that you've spoken about, the fact that, God willing, Romero and Van de Ven will be available again. We've got our two key pillars who know that they are fighting for their long-lasting legacy at the club, and get in a manager who is playing the right players in the right place. And how about the club themselves saying to every season ticket holder, you come to every game, and for every game you come to between now and the end of the season and give your support, we'll take 70 quid off your season ticket for next season. And I don't know, I don't want to start encouraging everyone to get drunk, but free beer, free cheese, whatever it might be. Let's see something from the top of the club to try and unite the fans and to make sure that every game is a party atmosphere, and we can show those Everton supporters that we know how to fight and how to protect our team as well. It needs everybody to do something. And funny enough now, George, having had this chat with you, I feel a little more confident than I did at the start of the podcast. But it's such a sad, depressing situation to find ourselves in. I will go back to all those who've been in touch with me and said, you've got this, you deserve this. You're one of the ones who wanted Postecoglou out. And George, I know you're a big Postecoglou fan. And the rights and wrongs of that decision, I don't think have any real bearing on where we are now. It shouldn't actually matter, should it, George? If the club was being run half decently, you could have Mickey Mouse in charge, and they should not be 1 point above the relegation zone. I still cannot get my head around the current league table.
No, it's crazy. And look, Marcus, and you won't be surprised with this. I don't think we'd be in this situation with Ange, but a lot of people say we would. But it's so beyond that now, isn't it? It's really not the time to be talking about that decision anymore. It's all about the present and the next 2 months, and Spurs somehow getting out of this. And you're right, the club can do something like that. I remember for the Europa League games towards the end of last season, when again the mood wasn't great because of how much was going on. Clearly, in the Premier League, but away to Bodo, they put flags out, or put scarves or flags out for the away supporters that made the trip there. The home game, the Bodo home game, was kind of really turned into an occasion. And I know there's lots of people behind the scenes, lots of fans that have really tried to make the atmosphere. Tried to work on singing sections and tried to work on getting designated areas and fans, like-minded fans in coordinated areas that can really create an atmosphere. And it has fallen on deaf ears a lot of the time. But you're right, the club should be doing something for these last 4 games. Whether that's putting scarves on everyone's seat for the Forest game, whether it is giving them a £10 token to spend on food or beer, whatever it is, there should be some sort of gesture to say, you know what, this has not been good enough, but we do need you now more than ever to help us get out of this, and we recognise it. And look, I guess thankfully for us all, we haven't got to worry too much about the Premier League for another week. and we can focus on Europe. And we're a bloody good
Yeah.
European team, aren't we? So bet on us
We're going to win the
bet us to
Champions
win
League,
the
mate.
Champions League.
First
I
team ever
know.
to get relegated and win the Champions League. So there you
But
go.
in all seriousness, the Atletico are a funny team as well. Any fans that understandably think we're going to lose that tie and probably the game next Tuesday, just look at Atletico's form over the last 6 weeks. They've beat Barcelona 4-0. They've also lost 3-0 to Barcelona. They've lost 3-0 to Real Vallecano, who are sort of battling relegation. Lost at home to Bodo. They are a bonkers team as well. And to be honest, these two Champions League games, as dire as this situation is, the sort of ferocity of the Premier League and not quite being to that level, even winning one of these games or just getting a draw in one of these games might give the players a bit of belief and a bit of spirit and give them some of that confidence back. So hopefully the kind of not being in the kind of cauldron and the pressure cooker of the Premier League might just kind of flip this momentum, which has obviously been down, going a downward trajectory for so long. These Atletico games could just get a little bit of belief back into these players, and then the Champions League might keep us up. You never know.
Well, I've got some really fond memories of those European runs under Harry, when Gareth Bale was in his pomp. And I've got to say, it would be funny as well to see Harry sitting in the stadium in Madrid next week. And who knows, let's just get that feel-good factor. But we've got to remain united, George. You're absolutely right. So, to all those fans out there who still say you Postecoglou haters and that's too strong a word, but wrong. Look, let's forget about that. Guys, we've got a massive job on our hands. This club has got to stay in the Premier League. George spelt out all the implications of Armageddon if Spurs get relegated, the financial situation, all the rest of it. It's unimaginable. So for 9 games, let's be Tottenham Hotspur United and get ourselves out of this hole. George, thank you so much. That's George Sessions of the Press Association. I'm Marcus Buckland. Yeah, thank God we haven't got a Premier League weekend. This weekend, we can sit and watch a little bit of FA Cup action, meaningless competition now that we're not in it. And then we'll be back in the Champions League on Tuesday, and we as a pod will be back to reflect on what happens there. In the meantime, keep believing, everybody. It is a fantastic club. It will rise again. I am Marcus Buckland. Come on, you Spurs.